With that, I see that it is 1 o'clock. Welcome, folks, to our T-Rock meeting. My name is Paul Caulfield. I'll serve as today's facilitator, moderator, MC, and we're mostly interested in hearing from you and from some other folks at the department. As was indicated as you signed up, we being recorded here. We never really attribute anything to anyone, but we want to make sure we don't lose anything. You should be seeing my screen right now. Looks like we're filling in with a full house. My first order of business is just to do a quick walkthrough of the agenda. I'll hit the objectives next, and then we'll hear from our commission chair and, of course, Secretary Gramian. Do a quick look at the scheduled milestones. There are few milestones left. We are right on the precipice of submitting the proposal. We have to firm that up today, which is what number 4 is all about. So looking at what we're really calling a strategic funding proposal, answering the mail of the executive order. So we'll do some updates, some review, and really come to understand those targets that we have set and really the extent to which we can get behind them, support them, and any concerns you might have as well. As I indicated, we'll have a briefing. We'll hear from 3 of our department colleagues on modernization and efficiencies within the department. And then Keith's going to talk us through a little bit of the draft document. This will follow right on the heels of today's presentation. The way Keith's pushing me, it may be today, but I think tomorrow. We'll get a little breather between today and tomorrow. And all members of the commission will receive a draft document, not by any means finished, but it's on its way. And that's where it has to be for our submission at the end of the month. We'll wrap up, allow 10 minutes or so for public comments. We had some last time, which was refreshing. We'll allow the commission chair to wrap it up. And if we're here till 3, we will close it off at 3. That remains to be seen. So today we review that draft strategic funding proposal. I'll just make a couple of color comments on that right now. These really are targets. And frankly, in the virtual setting, it's a little more difficult. I've been a facilitator for 30 some years. It's a little more difficult to establish, to get a sense of consensus. So we have had a very iterative process by which work group leaders have helped us define some of the goals that we ought to establish for the various revenue sources. So it's been back and forth, and we always bring that out to the full commission. That's what we're going to do again today with some sense of, hey, it's shaping up toward finality, but it's still open for comment. It's still open for review. We'll talk about that review process and what that entails for all members of the commission. And then, as I said a few times already, we'll get that modernization and efficiencies discussion. With that, Secretary of Transportation, and most importantly for today's undertaking, Commission Chair Gramian.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. We are now in the final stretch, and we have 2 weeks to go to complete our work. And because of the excellent efforts of the work groups and the work group leaders, we start this final stretch with a draft strategic funding proposal and a draft report. Over the next 2 weeks, our plan is to refine the report section by section, component by component. It's crunch time. You will all have the opportunity to thoughtfully evaluate the current proposal, identifying any ways to strengthen it for the ultimate action and implementation. I like to emphasize few points about the proposal as it's taking shape. Our proposal must be balanced. That is, to leverage a mix of revenue sources and approaches. Must be responsible, resulting in real and tangible reduction of the needs. The proposal must not be unreasonable. That is, not to place unwarranted burdens on the public. Public should see tangible benefits, improving their safety, access, mobility, reliability on our transportation system, above and beyond the obvious economic benefits. Obviously, our proposal must be focused on revenue targets, and that's through the deliverable of this commission, and that as we wrap up our work, that we recognize that the revenue targets for the 3 phases need to be kept much in view. That is part of what makes the proposal responsible as well. Last but not least, our proposal must be real. We no longer have the time to do nothing or simply tweak old practices, a little here, a little there. Let it be bold and new thinking and solutions, as the well-being of our Commonwealth is at stake. So as always, before we get started with our discussions, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes from our June 24th meeting. May I have a motion, please?
Make a motion, Secretary. This is Leanne Sherman to
Thank
approve the
you,
minutes.
yeah. Do I have a second?
Hi, it's Amy Kessler. I'll second.
Thank you, Amy. We have a motion, we have second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Any objection to the approval of the minutes? Hearing none, motion approved. Paul, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. You do that so well. I appreciate that. We're always glad to have the minutes behind us, and we have lots of minutes left in the day going forward. So as we've come to our compressed schedule, here we are in July. It's all about reviewing, revising as appropriate, finalizing the report, and submitting it, frankly, before August 1st, because if you look at your calendars, you'll see why we don't want to do it on that day. We want to get it in on a weekday, the Friday before that. So that is the game plan. So with that, we will step into our look at the strategic funding proposal. We're going to invite you today to participate really in two ways. There's no Mentimeter, and I realize I should pause and let everyone mourn the fact that I don't have my Mentimeter at my side right now. But that notwithstanding, the chat is wide open. We take very seriously all the comments that come in through whatever channel, but the chat should be up and running. And so you may offer your ideas through chat. But perhaps more importantly, we have some time to look at each of the major components. And by major components, I mean the tolling piece, the taxing piece, the MBUF, or as I'll start to share with you, the MBUC, but more on that in a few moments. We would invite you to raise your hand. Probably the easiest way to do this with so many on the call. So if you open your participant box and you want to speak, and it's okay to just unmute and talk, but if the traffic gets a little crazy, I'm going to put up the traffic light of asking you to raise your hand to talk, but we'd really like to have people unmute. Think about it this way. People are about to review in some detail the funding proposal. It's not going to be an enormous tome. This is going to be something on the order of 20 to 30 pages. There will be attachments and references and links and so forth, but the main body of this thing, let's say it's under 30 pages. We want you, as we go into this, to certainly make your thoughts known for all of us who will be reviewing this over the next several days. So if there's something that just needs to be said, that needs to be put in the minds of all commission members in their review, please, by all means, unmute and talk with us about it, be it full-throated support, or perhaps there is something you want to share a concern about. Those are very welcome. Chat, and even more so, unmuting and talking. We can probably take on the order of 10 minutes for each of those major components. We will start with just giving you the big picture, and it's just one slide. And what it's showing in very round numbers, in billions, stated annual revenue in billions, the way our proposal has shaped up, you'll recall that phase one is years 1 and 2. Now there are limitations to what can be kicked into gear right away, but nevertheless, the way the proposal stands, we're seeing some $3.5 billion of increase, taking that bite out of the unmet need on top of what is already understood as the likely revenue for addressing those needs. So that phases up in phase 2, which is just years 2 and 3 to some $6.6 billion. Phase 3 is a little tricky, and I see my friend Ron there. He's been really leading us with MBUF. We're saying it's year 5 and beyond, but if you just, and I didn't do a fancy graphic for this, but if you took that column that says 11.5 billion, really that column could slide to the right. It's not likely to be in year 5 or year 6, but the existing revenue sources and the phasing in of MBUF whatever that may be, that would run in a straight line out there until full MBUF implementation. It's very promising. It's very fair, equitable, and we think it's our future. That's really probably the boldest statement of our funding proposal, that MBUF is on its way. We want to be leaders in that. So we want to be bold, as the secretary said, in getting that in that direction. And much of the proposal is informed by the notion that people pay a fair share of their use, that this is a very equitable process for supporting transportation infrastructure. So enough of my lecture. I'll pause there. And questions are fair game as well. Chuck and Nate, that is Chuck Zimmerman and Nate Reese, who have been behind the scenes and in our work group sessions with the numbers and the spreadsheets, they're here to help with numbers, as are many other executives with the department. So pause there for commentary. I don't think these are surprises. We've been pulling these numbers out with minor variation for a few months now. But if anyone has anything to say, let it be said.
Paul, one thing the commissioners may want to think about, and we may want to be able to pivot back to this slide, it's probably handy as we look at the individual revenue components to think of these as our targets. The secretary spoke about targets, and as things are shaping up, these do appear to be reasonable targets that we should all keep in view.
Very good. Hearing no others and seeing nothing in the chat, I'm going to advance us to the first of the major categories. I hinted a few moments ago that there seems to be a trend toward terming mileage-based user charges. So we may see a migration to that terminology in the report. I don't know that that's going to kick in by the time tomorrow rolls around, but MBUF seems to be kind of losing out in the race to being MBUC, and that has nothing to do with the Milwaukee Bucks, as though they may be still trying to stay alive. But right now, the way this plays out, the mileage-based user fee component, it's the big one, and it really hits in that phase 3. So just describe that may certainly be, and in all likelihood, well beyond years 5 or 6. The MBUF pilot, while not at all on the same scale, has to be shown in the same look here, because it's a very important way to begin to get the systems in place to invite and encourage, frankly, require electric vehicles to pay their share. So from the start, we want to see that, as a continued piece of the move toward MBUF. And so the electric vehicle would be a great way to address that. And that's how these numbers come out. I'd like to just complete the picture on that by showing you that what has been factored into the numbers you saw a few slides ago in phase 3 is that there is a phase out of the gas tax. Now, obviously, it does not go away immediately, and some of it doesn't go away for the foreseeable future. There are elements of the local that have to be factored in. There's also a sense of having to, whatever component of that continues, that still has to be keeping pace with inflation. So even the part that is kept in is always advanced at a conservative rate of inflation. But that's just to show that at some point, as you shift over to an MBUF scenario, you're really phasing out the gas tax component of the revenue. Some of it may not go away, again, for the foreseeable future, because there are such things as bonds predicated on that, where this serves as the foundation for some of those legal agreements. So we don't want to cause panic with that, just to make sure we know that it is a big piece of our future. So I'll jump back one slide to the big picture, the big number of MBUF, and invite any and all, that can be work group leaders, work group members, or anyone at all who is on the commission. We'll hear from the general public at the end of the session.
Paul, Dave Sanko. Looking at the escalation on the EV pilot, that looks like like a very small number. Is that simply an inflationary projection? That's not any suggestion that the electric vehicle usage is going to increase over time?
Right. Dave, great question. And I happen to know that Chuck is all specced up with the latest, greatest on that. Chuck Zimmerman.
Yeah, what we did there was not just grow it by the 2% inflationary, which we're doing for everything. It also includes a 1% increase, and which again may be too small. That we did some quick research, and that's what they were saying, 13% over the next several years. I think, phase 3 is only year 5. That may be a small percent. I think really right around then or after that, or a year or two before, it could really increase. So we did take into account an extra growth there, but if the commission, certainly can do a higher percent than that if that's what we want to show.
And what was the base fee that was in year 1 and 2? What did that equate to, like a per vehicle charge?
And I'm looking for that.
I seem to recall discussion was like around 150, but to like 400. And
yeah, it's based on 16,000. Well, this is the MBUF.
This is not the registration.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
piece, Dave.
Right. Okay.
But it's a good question. I'll just say this. What we did was the actually registration piece is in at $275, I believe, which is not the full conversion, if they were paying the same as gas tax. So what we did here in thinking is the electric vehicle registration and the electric vehicle MBUF are still a little bit less than what the gas tax equivalent now would be. So just keep that in mind. We there's a thought to charge the full amount. The numbers that are presented here, the two together, are not quite at that full amount.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you, Dave. Excellent questions. And then you will see on the registration fee side, and we can tag Chuck again for the assumptions there when we come to that. So how about others on this? And Ron, of course, you are certainly welcome, and we have appreciated your leadership in this whole process, but we didn't queue you up for any formal presentation this time, but thanks for what you've done. And here's where the numbers lie. I think we still have you muted there, Drenny.
Yeah, well, I think, you've been reading some stuff recently where we expect to have 500,000 charging stations within 3 years, by 2025. That's 4 years, I guess. And that's just one corporation that's doing that. The drive for electric vehicles is continuing. It sounds like it's further off, but I suspect that there's a lot of states are getting excited about it. Utah's passed a tax or a mileage-based fee for putting in place within the next 10 or 11 years. I just saw that about 2 days ago. I'm not sure how they're going to do it, and neither are they for that matter, but they're doing it. And we have Senator Smucker also put a proposal in to do some mileage based on electric vehicles. So when we start doing it, it'll happen, and quit talking about it. So I think it's important to notice that. And you're right, the EV MBUF right now is at a lower rate than what the existing gas tax is. And it's only for the state part of it as well, so there's no federal piece in anything that we're doing here, which suggests that the feds at some point have got to get in this game. And they are, but and we need to be very closely connected to it. Big challenge, but it's, like you had indicated, it looks like it's the most probable window to get us to where we need to be and to replace the existing gas tax. So even if there's objections as we go along, there isn't anything else out on there on the horizon that we see that makes up the difference. And it'll be different for every state. We're 58 cents. Some states are 20. Some are 35. They'll get into it eventually. I don't think they will. But that's just general discussion.
Yeah. Thanks, Ron. Any others on this big looming opportunity, this big looming new way that things are going to be looked at in the future. And of course, you'll all have a chance to go through this in some detail in the funding proposal. But anything now that people should have in mind from your perspective? I don't see any hands there.
Just one, I'm sorry, Paul.
Oh,
Dave,
that's okay, Dave. You're up. You're up.
So this is gross dollars, not net, right? For like
Correct.
on the MBUF, I mean, so we don't know the cost of implementation or monitoring or anything.
Correct. This would be assuming this revenue for the transportation system. So if there's 100% and at that small dollar amount there may be, that
Sure.
would impact the fee. Correct.
Thanks.
It costs us 10% to collect it. We need 10% more.
Yeah. Well, and I say 100% only because it's only 2 million. Obviously the bigger that program or the more vehicles, the percent administrative would be a lot lower as it goes up. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But I was talking about the big number too. So it'd be everything.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. You get a 2-for-1 on the hand raising, Dave. So you're in good shape. Any others? All right. That is, and just a repeat, that clearly factored in, and in the numbers you saw in I know it's slide 7 in case I have to go back, but the big phasing numbers reflected that phasing out indeed of the liquid fuels. So on the tolling side, we have just one slide to take a look at here. I'll just deal with the managed lanes part. This group has narrowly defined managed lanes, and it's a one-time proposition. So it's not a major plank in the platform of getting to where we need to get to with the tolling piece. The corridor tolling on the other side is quite significant. And of course, that would be corridors that come readily to mind, an I-95 or something. So just leave those numbers up for you. They speak for themselves. But Leanne or Mark or Jeff or anyone else from that work group or anyone who'd like to comment on that, you are of course welcome to do so. All right, I don't see hands and I don't hear voices other than the usual ones yelling in my head, but I think we're otherwise okay. Thank you so much to the work group that worked on tolling. These are big numbers. We can't get down to the dollar number. It's probably, better to say 2.4 billion, 2.5 billion, but just because we were running everything out on the massive spreadsheet, we kept it a little round, but on the other hand, we gave you some specificity there. This is another one slide hit. I think that it is fair to say that by and large, the sense has been in terms of the redirection of funding, make certain that the state police are covered. We're not turning our backs on that so much as to say the structure of this doesn't work at present. And so what this shows is that while this is not a revenue source, it's a redirection of funding, the net effect is shown here. So the reason that is decreased over time is that at the 32 million or so, which is the current level of reduction per year, these are the kinds of numbers you get to if you play them out over the phases that we're looking at here. So that across this one hasn't changed a lot in the course of our conversations. Haven't heard a lot of objection to it. We just have to be, just very straightforward about making certain that it's the right message. But I'll pause here. I don't know if Bob, from his team's perspective or any others, I know we've said a lot about this one before, but it's a single slide. So. It's kind of like when I'm waiting for those public comments there. I don't sing well, so I'm going to move us forward. So really on the fees side, I'm going to give you a quick look ahead just so you understand what we're going to do. We're going to look at the increases on this slide. On the next slide, we're going to look at increases as well. And then finally, we're going to look at the new fees that emerge in the course of our proposal. So this is a pretty significant piece of the overall funding proposal here. On the increase side, and by all means, if you want a refresher on how much that increase represents, in any factor here, by all means ask. But the first thing you're going to notice, I think, is that the vehicle registration fee, you could really just stay at that line for a moment, the top line, top row, and say, okay, with the increase proposed, it's about an $800 million bump up, and then that is extrapolated out to phases 2 and 3. There is on the table, and the proposal is now taking shape, to consider seriously an approach to vehicle registration that incorporates an ad valorem, a value-based vehicle tax or vehicle fee. So the reason that you see the same number there is that some portion of that 800 would be addressed by the value of the vehicle. There has certainly been some concern about whether the value of a given vehicle has any bearing on its wear and tear that it creates on the roadway and so forth. On the other hand, there has also been the sense that it may make sense to allow for a fee by those who are using the system and better able to, at least evidenced by their purchase of certain vehicles, able to shoulder that burden. When you put those two together, what you see in that third row is the reduction to the registration fees if you have the ad valorem. And there's arithmetic behind this thing that you don't want me to get into. You'll see it in the report, or we can quiz Chuck on it. But the bottom line is that it comes out to an increase in revenue in total of $1.25 billion, and then ramping up to 1.3, 1.4 if I round phase 3. The notion is get it through a registration increase. Maybe some of that increase is incorporating the ad valorem as a means of assessing and producing that revenue source. So that's why that one took a whole screen, because it gets a little complicated. Chuck, I don't know if there's any color commentary just on that one that might help, because I did that rather coarsely just in handling the big picture here.
Yeah, I would just add that if you're used to seeing 750 million, we've upped it to 800 million based on the revenue estimates that were in the budget enactment on July 1st. So that's the reason that number changed. And right, Paul, without confusing anyone, I will give detail if anyone has questions, but the way you explained it was great.
Chuck, we also have a question in the chat room from Jeff asking how the recent budget has impacted the revenue estimates.
Yes, and that the 279 million for the capital infrastructure item is a one-time thing. We've never definitively said what year one is, but assuming, even best case, if this were to pass immediately, it's going to be near till we actually get that revenue, probably not in this fiscal year. So therefore, the need, we could reduce the 279 million if that were a permanent thing every year, but that is a one-time, as far as we know, amount for this year. So, and phase 1 really is probably in reality next, a year down the road. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, just to keep you on the spot there, Chuck. Dave's question about this is what does this say? 100%? Is that I'm guessing here, but what is the bump here?
100%, yes. We currently get about 800 million in registration fees, and that would be doubling it at 100%. Yes.
You don't need to. I totally.
You believe me?
Yes.
Yes.
I think I was able to mute that conversation, which I don't think was intended for us. The other one is, though, Chuck, the question that Amy posed, the basis on the corridor tolling. So I might have jumped off of tolling a little quickly there, but the basis for that, because we did really get into some look at costs per segment and so forth. I wonder if you might not mind
Sure.
Doing a
And
little
I
work on
didn't see,
that too.
yeah, I didn't scroll down in the chat. Sorry. Too many windows. Yes, the corridor tolling, um, the 2.350 base revenue amount. And, you know, there will be a lot into what miles are actually tolled. Is it the interstates or portions of the interstates? That what we're showing here is the targeted revenue amount. So the number of miles and the actual rate would be both dependent, but the targeted revenue amount is at 2.350.
Thank you, Chuck. I should point out that my graphic here, and you can't see these things, folks, as you may know from experience until you put them up in a large group setting. Phase 2, I think you could all repeat, is years 3 and 4, right? So that just tripped us up on the graphic here. Phase 1 is 1 and 2. 2 is 2 and 3. You're going to see that mistake repeated. Thanks for catching that. Who did?
One of our T-Rock members who is very good with numbers actually caught that, Paul.
I think they all are. So,
And
go ahead, Chuck.
in chat also, there's a question. Yes, the ad valorem would be it would be based on the value of the vehicle. So it would be totally dependent upon that. So the higher the value of the vehicle, the more tax would be paid. Yes.
Just pause on this one another half minute or so before moving us to the next fee set, which is another increase. All right. So here's what's taking shape on some other increases in fee. Leasing fee. So when you lease a vehicle or rent one, these are the phased increases. Remember my caveat on the phase 2, but these are the phased increases of not insignificant dollars on these lease and rental. So you're using it, you're using the roads to use it, and you're renting it and paying a little more share of that burden. And as always, welcome to unmute and speak with us or place something in chat. These do not seem to have been very controversial all along. I don't think that means they have to jump astronomically, but I don't recall a lot of conversation about these either from the fee group or from the T-Rock commission members in general.
Well, they're also not very significant revenue generators, so they're a minor player in the thing.
Yeah, just kind of comes under the fair share umbrella, I think, Ron. So the next look at fees, the final of the 3 looks at fees are new. So they do not exist right now, and there are a couple of big ones as you read down. So as you come down to the TNC, as we've been calling it all along, and that now incorporates the taxis, et cetera, the sense would be that by phase 2, a game plan could be developed, whatever would have to be enacted to make that a reality would be in place out there in year 3, 4, and that it might represent something on the order of 210 million. Yes, 210 million. On the goods delivery, and Jenny got us queued up to give this consideration last time, like the TNCs, the sense would be that these would help to fund local needs as well. These are 2 where the last mile concept is most evident. And so the thought process has been that with our proposal is the understanding that while it may net less to the department, that it'd be important to incorporate the local component of the TNCs and a goods delivery fee. I will caveat as well by saying we've been back and forth a number of times on taxes and fees as to what's the right term. Goods delivery fee is where we've settled for the moment. It seems to be the best way to frame what is being done with adding a dollar or a $2 surcharge on parcel delivery. Big numbers, and you know, one way or another, yes, people are paying for it, but by buying goods that are delivered on the system, you're helping to fuel the upkeep, maintenance of that system. So we'll pause for commentary, support, concern, as you see it.
Paul, maybe worth mentioning that goods delivery fee is not going to be something unique to the Commonwealth, that it is done in other areas. And we took in consideration what those other areas were and came up with, like an in-between number that we thought would fit well with us.
So what, Bob, you weren't New York City out there at $3, but you weren't, what was the other one, at 25 cents or something?
The city of Denver at 25 cents.
Yeah.
And to answer Amy's question, yes, that is based on $1 per delivery.
Yes.
Excellent. Any others on this? That fees group, I'll tell you, that's the one you want to be on. They had a lot to consider, and we do appreciate the heavy lifting. And you know, everything is shown here. So aircraft registration fee, you know, you're reading it right. It's not big numbers, but again, this is definitely under the thought process that it be shared by all who use the entirety of infrastructure in the Commonwealth. Just trying to keep up with chat. I think we're okay. On the tax side, there are 3 that are proposed. Vehicle sales increase. The gas tax just being indexed to inflation, as I said, you would see this. So whatever portion of it remains in place is advanced with and I think, Chuck, your plug there was just a 2%.
Yes, that's another one that changed a little bit based on the most recent, well, the actual year of 2021, it came in really strong. And that number does fluctuate from year to year. But so we used a little bit lower number that I believe is the Department of Revenue estimate for 21-22. So before that was 450 million, but now still at the same 2%, it's at 550 million.
Okay. And a jet fuel tax imposed at 10 up to 11 million as you get into the out years. On the tax side, this proposal does not show a corporate, personal, or real estate transfer tax as a component of the proposal. We have stuck pretty closely to the sense of keeping things transportation related. These are not, we've tried to be realistic as to what's appropriate and even what's possible. No one took this up and made a real strong case for this being, any of these being a central component of the funding proposal, trying to be realistic. If you think about the secretary's, not unreasonable, the secretary's opening remarks. So we were charged as a commission with taking a look at everything. So there's a long list of things that we've looked at. They're not all shown here. There are some other things that we have considered along the way. I might toss out things like people have suggested, something related to a bicycle tax or something. We certainly want to make the case that that's been looked at. It's not absolutely out of the question, but like these, it has not become a fundamental part of the funding proposal for reasons related to the direction we're taking, keeping it transportation related, keeping it and promoting the maintenance of the infrastructure, but not disadvantaging anyone. People had even tossed in a sneaker tax, and I frankly don't know whether they were kidding or were serious, but that is another example of something that has not become a central component of this proposal.
So Secretary Hassel has a question in chat. And the way we built that was the gas tax indexing, 2% a year. I believe it was 75, 225 in that range. In phase 3, year 5, it was 400 and something. That full 400 million we have proposed being eliminated is in the 4,088 million gas tax reduction and being offset by MBUF. So we don't show a gain. I guess we realize that gain in that it's built into MBUF. So it's a very good question. It was, I forget the third number for the indexing, but
is it what I have up here now, Chuck?
No, it's actually up above. Well, okay, yeah, there. I'm sorry, the 386. That would be the increase of 2% each year. We factored that number. If you go to the gas tax reduction, I believe it was 4,088 million, probably at the very bottom. That 386 million is added to that offset.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Dan. Similar to what we said about corporate or personal income tax, there have been some proponents of parts of what you see up here, but as to being part of the ongoing transportation-focused proposal, the recreational marijuana, gambling proceeds, and the American Rescue Plan, which is kind of a special case of its own, they are not really, again, central to the ongoing long-term and continued support of infrastructure. There have been some proponents of these, and it probably brings to mind, and Keith can address this when he talks us through the review process for the proposal. We do want to present a fair characterization of interests that have been expressed in the course of our work together. So here, this might be a footnote that there is some support, and there is some rather strenuous support for being first in line or getting in line should there be a legal cannabis equation. Right now, the conservative side and the transportation focused side does not make this, it doesn't make it to our numbers right now. It would be a windfall if perhaps it were to happen, but it's not part of the central proposal right now. There is a question that popped up, thanks Dave, on corridor tolling as to whether that includes the congestion fee. So I'll look to our experts on that to help us out, be they Chuck or Mark or Leanne. Thanks, Mark.
Sure, Dave. Congestion, not so much, but variable tolling is considered as part of that tolling strategy as well. So, which is a very similar to congestion fee. We, with the help of Penndot, define congestion fees as one that would add no new capacity. So that's why we excluded the term congestion, but variable pricing is very much a part of that corridor tolling, if that helps at all.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so there is a question as well, follow up on, and Mark, we might keep you front and center on this. Corridor tolling, not the bridge tolling. And I probably failed to mention and should have that we have looked at that P3 major bridge tolling as a completely separate component. It simply didn't enter into this equation. But Mark, you might do a better job of explaining that than I just did.
Yeah, a couple things that we certainly talked about, didn't put a price tag on it, was the bridge tolling that's being done, and our group is clearly supportive of that effort. Another thing that we talked about, but just because there was no federal authority to do so under any circumstances, was the tolling of all interstates, which is something we are also in favor of, but just because of the federal mechanism I didn't see a path forward on that in the short term to put numbers with it. So there are other opportunities in tolling clearly that we could talk about as part of this. We just felt for this chart, this is the one that's probably the most attainable now. Another thing I would share with you too is, working very closely with the MBUF group, these things too could coincide together if it was chose to do so, or could also be used together in different mechanisms too, depending on what the MBUF, if that would have interstate a different number versus rural. So there's all kinds of components in there that we talked about, but just as it relates to chart and the simplicity of a July 31st deadline didn't get expanded on in here.
Thank you, Mark. Others, and this can go back up through any of the categories. I can go backward in this PowerPoint, no worries. So we're in good shape ahead of time. So
one other footnote for the TROC members to keep in mind is, to Dave's question about bridge tolling, it's also good to remember that the revenue associated with that is generally associated with the project, not to the bottom line of statewide revenue per se, but the improvement of that particular bridge. So it would not contribute to overall state funding, such as these other revenue sources.
Keith, I would just add probably to the region, maybe region even just narrowly defined as what's ancillary around that location. But yeah, that's a really good point.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, everybody. Move on, Paul. Okay. Local solutions. We see the proposal, the funding proposal, indeed having a very important component relating to local solutions. Now, we're going to start just for a moment. Larry's been working on some local needs work. It's a lot to get your arms around, as those of you who have looked at it know. But this transportation system, it's old, it's big, and it's definitely more extensive than what the state happens to own. Somewhere on the order of 78,000 miles of roadway. If you look at the over 20-foot bridges, somewhere over 6,300 of them. Our municipalities number is 2,560 out there. The unmet funding is looked at for 2021. Right now, the number is just close to 4 billion, call it $3.9 billion. So it's right up there with the kinds of numbers we're talking about. And the system is, by some measures, twice as big, in some respects, at least in terms of lineal miles. It includes as well multimodal facilities. So you have authorities at a regional and local level. So we haven't throughout here done a lot to hit the local need, except to say we understand it to be great. This starts to put some figures on it, and we intend to follow through. So Amy brings up a great point. The 20-foot is rather arbitrary. And a lot of the little ones are, of course, in the municipality. So when you think about those that are under 20, our numbers happen to have just the 20-foot and greater, or above 20 feet, I should say, just in the numbers that we had. And there's quite a lot more perhaps that are smaller than that. That is just a first pass, not by any means the final chapter on the local needs. The funding solutions that are taking shape, though, of course, locals continue to share in the gas tax. As you phase in MBUF, those revenues, of course, similarly would offset the reductions in liquid fuels proceeds to locals. We see the next two that I highlighted when we got to them in their categories previously, local package delivery, TNC fees, being a place where that last mile, where the local is particularly impacted and therefore, maybe particularly positioned to share in that revenue. As well, the proposal is supporting creating the opportunity, it's going to take legislation, for a sales tax. And I think we've settled on kind of a county level because there's no mechanism, at any regional or any, unless there would be some changeover. So right now, that's really what's shaping up. We still have some work to do on this. We're working closely with the work group for the local folks, but I'll open it up right there. And there is some chat activity here as well, so even more general. So Secretary Torres say, would passage of a federal infrastructure packaging potentially reduce funding projections? I don't know if maybe one of our colleagues from the department wants to address that, but we've generally said, looking at the continuity, the ongoing need, that has not been a big factor in our considerations thus far. But indeed, it could help, and it would help. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that.
Paul, one thing that will be in the proposal document that the TROC members see tomorrow will be a table related to the experience of other states. And in general, what comes out from that table is that because of the general decline or slow rate of growth in federal funding, the general trend you've seen is states have taken action to diversify their revenue bases, to make sure that there's sufficient money for improvement and maintenance. That's been the overall trend, but there's also been flexibility that when federal funding increases, that would be factored into.
So on the local, whether it be our hardworking local work group members or others. Thank you, Becky. Maybe the MPOs are authorized. Yeah, I almost said it, Becky, and I just wasn't sure where that stands, but I guess a hard look at whether an MPO could be an authorized agent on tax revenue, sales tax. That would be the regional cut at this, indeed. So thank you. All right. I think the package delivery is happening on a local level there. So, well, amazing. 10 minutes ahead of schedule. We can move forward with our briefing here. And as he pops his camera on, I am delighted to reintroduce actually our executive director for TROC, our leader, those of us who are working a lot behind the scenes, and Deputy Secretary for Planning, Larry Shiflett. And Larry will kick off a 3-team member presentation here. So Larry, I am ready to move things forward for you, Michael, and Kurt.
All right. Thanks so much, Paul. And again, good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to share with the commission many of the great things that have happened and or are happening at Penndot. As an agency and a big agency, we don't really often take the time to brag or share about the good work that we are doing or have done. So we wanted to take just a few minutes of today's agenda to do just that and provide you with some of the good things that we've undertaken and or are undertaking at Penndot. Just real quickly on this slide, then I'll turn it over to my colleagues, Mr. Kaiser and Mr. Myers. In 2010, Federal Highway Administration introduced the concept of the State Transportation Innovation Council. That was introduced to state DOTs as well as industry partners, and it was really aimed at establishing an overall process in which innovation techniques and processes could be evaluated and implemented quickly and proficiently. Pennsylvania held its inaugural STIC business meeting in, I believe, March of 2012. We were one of the first out of the gate, if not the first out of the gate nationally. And with that, Pennsylvania's STIC has become a national model for both innovation and collaboration. And to hit on that bottom bullet point with continuous improvement, STIC's no different. In 2018, the STIC continued to evolve, and as it unveiled its STIC moving forward plan, as part of that plan for moving forward, the plan focused on refining the STIC organizational structure, as well as really clearly looking and defining the process for developing innovations for deployment moving forward. And then the next bullet point there for TFAC, you can slide back up quick, Paul. Perfect, thank you. Just to hit on that, sort of the predecessor to this wonderful commission was the commission known as the Transportation Funding Advisory Commission. That commission included several of what was being termed as modernization recommendations. In their August 2011 final report, those modernization opportunities were really internal to Penndot and were focused on better meeting not only our customer needs, but also saving money in the process, and not only for the Commonwealth, but also for the customers. As we move through the rest of the presentation here, both Mike and Kurt will highlight many of the TFAC recommended modernization efforts that Penndot has undertaken and or we're currently undertaking. And then lastly, real quick, I just wanted to kind of double down on our efficiency report that was issued earlier this calendar year. I believe it was in mid-April timeframe. We did share that with the commission, I believe at our April 15th meeting. But again, I just wanted to emphasize that when there's an opportunity, click on the link there, take a look at it, not now, obviously, but there's not 90 overall efficiencies that are in that document, and the report contains items spread throughout the department. So it's not just one area. Just to give you a quick couple highlights in design and construction, there's things related to estimating and cost controls and driver and vehicle services, not to steal Kurt's thunder, but there's things about third-party testing programs in our efficiency report. On the multimodal side, had the development of a capital planning tool, the development of Find My Ride PA app, as well as the modernization of their grant processing. In planning, we did some electronic progressive mapping. We also did technical assistance and training for PennDOT Connects, and we also developed the traffic data portal and traffic information repository that's available to the public. So again, those are just some of the good things that we've been able to accomplish. Some things that came out of, again, as I said, the previous commission that looked at funding, we took those things to heart. So sort of re-emphasize that continuous improvement, the things that we've been hearing throughout the last almost 5 months now, and that we've been discussing will certainly be taken to heart as we move forward once we get a final report together and start addressing some of the items that might be in there as well. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Kaiser, and we can go to the next slide, Paul.
There you go.
All
Mike
right.
Kaiser.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. Just going to touch on a number of issues here. I'm not going to dive too deeply into each one of these. And of course, this is just a small sample of what we're doing. But just to start off with the traffic signals, a conversion to the LED lighting and optimize the timing along the corridor. Again, got to recognize that a lot of our major corridors travel through multiple municipalities. So, just trying to get everyone on the same page, using the same software, having a system that efficiently moves traffic. Of course, the LED lights, are about 80% in terms of the savings for the energy cost. And by the way, I should have mentioned in the beginning, we have over 14,000 traffic signals out there, the majority of which almost nearly 100% are owned and operated by the local municipalities. So again, that practice of installing LED signals is now commonplace, and we do have a number of programs that roll out each year, for an opportunity for funding to do that. The automated work zone traffic control, again, a big push by industry. There's some savings on this, but the big positive here is safety in our work zone. So that's been implemented per the legislation that was passed. Of course, when you go through those work zones, you get a 24/7 monitoring for speed limits and things of that nature. Again, we've seen about a $2 million savings, but more importantly, this is something that really is self-funded. Now the fees in that, or I should say the fines in that, are relatively low. We didn't want to make this, into a revenue producing item. we're really trying to enforce safety out there. So we make about enough money to operate the program, and that's really what the legislature had intent when it was passed. Again, I think that's about a 5-year pilot program. So we're probably through year 1.5 right now. Very similar as the red light running cameras. Again, this is a pilot effort. Obviously, there's an opportunity there to reduce accidents as high as 25% reduction in intersection crashes. Again, it's a 24/7 monitoring. If you talk to folks in Philadelphia, I think it's pretty effective. They reported to us, casually in a couple of meetings that, if you're speeding along these corridors, you do get a ticket. So again, that program's up and running. I'll jump to the expanded and updating. HOP is a term for highway occupancy permits. We get into the acronyms a little too often here at Penndot, so I wanted to spell that out. And again, this is just first of all for everyone on this meeting, just a very huge effort. We issue thousands of permits each year, if not into the 10,000s. So this system, e-permitting, was put in place. It's to streamline the application. It does clearly document the cycle. So, if the applicant submits a permit, we review, that time's captured, comments are captured, it goes back, and we know when the applicant resubmits and if they, addressed those comments or not. So again, we're continually looking to update that system, make sure it's working well. I think there's some proof to that because initially we had an expedited review fee that was offered, and that was never used or seldom used, which kind of tells us that, hey, the overall process is working pretty well. Of course, tied to that is, PA 67 of the Chapter 441, that's the driveway regulations. We're updating that as well. So if you jump to the next slide, Paul. Again, bundling individual projects in the programs. Again, this is really just all about efficiencies. If you have similar projects, can't you take advantage of that? Of course, our biggest example of that was the rapid bridge replacement program. We replaced 558 bridges statewide. There's been some other initiatives. I can tell you Dauphin County right now is looking to do, that's the county government level, looking to do some county bridges with that same kind of model in mind. And if you talk to municipalities that have a bridge in that bundle, there's a bunch of savings there. So again, moving on to ADA curb cut ramps, trying to remain compliant with the American Disabilities Act. We started to include those in all of our projects. And again, generally curb and sidewalks, a local responsibility, but for the ADA compliant, we decided to include that into our construction projects. So you can, we estimated about 238 million in savings for local governments since we implemented that. And again, there's some efficiencies and some expectations out there that, when we're following our roadway construction criteria, that you're seeing expected results out there in terms of what the ramps and that look like. We have an internal document here for those of you that are consultant partners with us for minor projects. We streamline the review approval processes, taken a lot of steps out of that, put some responsibility back into the consultants on that. Again, these are minor projects, but if it took X amount of submissions in the past for type, size, and locations for bridges, we dropped that down again on minor projects and said, hey, let's get this submission in, keep it simple. We're not looking at 4 or 5 different alternatives for a structure that's 25 feet. New technology, again, all we're trying to do there is using what's around us to try to improve our processes, make them more efficient. There's a lot of e-construction apps out there that we're using. We put all of our construction documentation, our roadway construction standards, our design manuals, all of those products are online now. So, you know, years ago, you went into a job trailer, you know, where the office was for the construction, and you'd see plans upon plans and spec books, and you know, you needed about double size of the trailer just to have all those manuals. So that's been streamlined, and again, any kind of changes can be rolled out pretty quickly. I don't have anything bullet point wise, but I wanted to mention e-ticketing. That's been a pretty successful effort for us as well, and a safety value there. So e-ticketing, really the simplest way to explain that is as a product's coming into the site. For example, we used to get tickets on how many tons of material was in the truck. I'm guilty of doing this myself. When I first started, you step up on the step of the door, and the driver hands you the ticket. All that's done now electronically, so it's much more efficient and obviously much safer there as well. So again, that's the new technology, and I think just have two more there, Paul. The next slide, we'd go into the consolidation of a statewide traffic management center. We're now teamed up with PEMA and PSP. Any other agencies that need to be involved when we have a statewide issue. Most commonly, obviously, used during severe weather events, winter services, and things like that. But obviously, it just keeps everything under one roof. Good coordination, and from there we can reach out to the adjacent states. You know, regarding you know, if we're putting restrictions on interstates and things like that, it's not just a Pennsylvania decision. And if you are making a decision within a state, you really have to let them know the adjacent states what's going on there, or you quickly lose control of that situation. So that's all in place now. Got a new facility over there at Elmerton Avenue. And then the last one, just wanted to talk briefly about, was the service patrol. We have a Capital Beltway Patrol in the Harrisburg area, serves I-81, portions of I-83, essentially the loop around Harrisburg with 581. That was funded prior to this effort through county maintenance. So, you know, Dauphin County, Cumberland County, and York had a little piece to pay into this for each year. We opened that up for some advertisement. You know, wrap the wreckers and some advertising for the local companies. And that saves us about a little over $4 million a year. And then every so often that gets re-advertised, so you know, someone else can get into the fold there. So that's just a quick overview. There's a lot of other things. You know, I touched on a few things a few weeks ago as well. But I think at this point in time, Paul, I can turn it over to Kurt.
Hey, before you do, Mike, a couple of our work group leads from the local group had observations for you as well. Dave mentioned that HOP revision be done in consultation with locals, you know, just to sort of help with the planning, the coordination. I don't know if you want to respond to that. It obviously makes sense.
Well, yeah, and again, I always had a rule as a district executive. You know, we didn't approve anything unless the local municipality was aware of it. So, you know, as part of the process, we do require that the municipalities actually give us a letter saying they're at least aware of it. And then from there, there's also a process where third parties can intervene and be involved in the review as that process goes along. Generally, that's really more for the private side. If you have a neighbor or something like that that's a little concerned, from a municipal standpoint, we're happy to share anything. And a majority of the time, again, if you think about traffic signals and being owned and operated by the municipalities, if a permit does come through and it includes a new signal, generally then we actually have the applicant be the municipality. So again, there's no surprises there. Obviously, we don't want to issue a permit and a new signal with the municipality not understanding what's going on there. So again, we're open to having them come in on pre-scoping meetings, having the municipalities there as well.
And I think Amy's question kind of gets at that same scenario, Mike, where care be taken that the developer addresses the, the related improvements and so forth, and not kind of backdooring it through local government or, some other state funding program, that those improvements serve the developer's needs, just making sure that that's appropriately covered.
Correct. Yep. And we're happy to include any comments, into the system from the municipalities as well.
Thank you, Mike. Well done as always. Kurt, I have some slides for you as well. Kurt Myers.
Very good, Paul. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to the commission today. And as Mike and Larry pointed out, I'm going to mention a few things that we're doing, but they certainly by no means are all the things that we're currently working in driver vehicle services, not only from an efficiency standpoint, but also from a cost saving standpoint. And perhaps most importantly, from the customer experience standpoint, and ensuring that the customers of driver and vehicle services have the very best experience they possibly can when doing business with us. We really impact a little over 10.1 million customers in Pennsylvania. We do somewhere in the range of 34 million transactions a year. We collect a little over $3 billion a year in both vehicle sales tax as well as registration and driver licensing fees. And so from that standpoint, it is a big business, but it's also one that's focused on the individual customer. And so many of the things that you'll see that I'll mention here today are items that are truly built around making sure that the customer experience is as positive as possible. The first item I'd like to note on is the CDL, the non-CDL third-party testing. For years before we implemented this program, we had done CDL testing for third parties, but we had never ventured into that area for non-CDL. And so a few years ago, working with the legislature, we were able to get legislation passed that allowed us to contract with third parties so that they could offer the non-CDL test. And to date, we have 44 locations across the Commonwealth where our customers now have the choice of either getting their skills test done at a driver licensing center for Penndot, or they can go to a third-party tester. Obviously, the third party is charging a fee. We do not, but it gives that customer choice, which is so important in today's day and age, that our customers do have a choice on what they might be able to do as far as the skills test is concerned. And in addition to that, it has actually saved us time and effort from the standpoint of our examiners, and allowed them now to be able to focus on areas of their expertise as well, dealing with DL questions and transactions with our customers. To date, as an example, those third-party testers have done 124,000 skills tests. And that equates essentially to about 4,100 workdays saved for our staff, that they can now focus on other areas of driver licensing. Moving on to the iPads, sounds relatively a simple process, but here again is another streamlining process. All of our examiners that do give skills tests now have iPads. Information is populated. We worked closely with the IT staff to ensure that we could put a program together where the iPads now can be utilized not only for the parent or guardian signature, but if a student does pass their skills test, what used to happen is that our examiner would have to walk inside of the building. They would have to fill out some paperwork, and then that paperwork would be taken by the person who's passed the test over and gotten their picture taken. Now, when someone passes, that we simply press a button, all that information is immediately sent into the center. The customer can go in and get their picture taken and walk out with their driver's license. What does that save us? About 3 minutes a transaction. Does that sound like a lot? Not on an individual transaction, but when you consider the fact of the number of tests that we give a year, which is approximately 240,000 tests, the fact is that saves about 7,200 hours a year in processing time, just by that addition of the iPads. When we look at other areas internally behind the scenes, you'll see here the OPEX 3-to-1. Well, what is that? Well, today, when we receive paperwork from a customer that's mailed to us, we have to, first of all, receive it. We have to image it. then we strip the money off of it and we deposit that. And currently that is a 3-step process involving 3 employees. In 2 weeks, we'll be implementing a new program that now allows 1 employee to do all 3 aspects of the transaction. That reduces the transaction time and that initial processing from 2 days to 1 day. We haven't quite calculated the exact savings on that. As I said, we're not going to be implementing it for another 2 weeks. But that is something that we're excited about from the standpoint of being able to streamline our processes even more. Mobile ticketing and concierge service. Here again, relying on iPads and the ability to text customers. This really gives the customer, when they visit one of our driver licensing centers, the freedom to be able to move around. So a lot of our centers, if you've been to one, you know that they're in strip malls or in malls. So there are other stores around. Mobile ticketing will allow the customer to put in their phone number, their cell phone number. We'll be able to text them and let them know where they stand in line. So if they want to go next door to the pharmacy, they can do that, and we'll be able to text them and let them know and give them status updates. Concierge service will also be the same. We'll be able to be outside meeting the customer when they arrive, being able to issue them their ticket right then and there before they even get into the building. Paul, if you could go to the next slide. So the reentry program. Now, maybe many of you don't think of this, but this is a program that we put together working with the Department of Corrections a number of years ago, and now we're in the process of expanding it to the counties. I mean, we have a lot of returning citizens that are coming from various institutions across the Commonwealth, and certainly from the counties as well. And the most important item that a returning citizen leaving an institution can have is an identification card or a driver's license. And so over the years, working with the Department of Corrections, since 2015, we've issued a little over 44,000 ID cards and driver's licenses for those who had them before they were incarcerated to individuals, so that day one, when they walk out of the institution, they're in a position to be able to do and get the basic services that they need, such as jobs, obviously, but also benefits, things of that nature that they need to get their feet on the ground and move forward within society. We're working with counties right now, and in fact, we have a number of counties that are already participating in this program. And our hope is that over a period of time, we'll be able to expand this program to all 67 counties. But it's already paying benefit for some counties, York County as an example. We've been in conversation with some other counties, Montgomery County and others. And we plan to continue to move forward with addressing that. Elimination of the license plate sticker. Now, here's an example where Larry talked about this. This really came out of Act 89. It was one of the items back in 2011 when the department at that time was tasked by the commission at that time to demonstrate ways that we could potentially reduce cost. And the elimination of the license plate sticker was one of the items that the department identified. And as you may know, Act 89 then included that language with it. I can say without any reservation whatsoever, this has been an incredible success. To date, the department, since eliminating the license plate sticker 4.5 years ago, has realized $13 million in savings. Our customers, and again, getting back to that issue of customer experience, our customers love it. They love the ability to be able to print their registration card off of their personal computer and walk out and put it in their car and be done with the process. Revenues have stayed consistent. Number of vehicles registered has stayed consistent. As I've said to people in the past, we had scofflaws when we had a license plate sticker, and we have some scofflaws still today that even out after a license plate sticker. So the reality is there is a very, very small percentage that are a problem, but they were a problem before. And the fact of the matter is that 99.9% of our customers and our constituency are good, honest individuals and pay their registration fees. The evaluation of opportunities in transition to Penndot standalone photo centers. This is an initiative we started a number of years ago. I know Ted's on the phone, and we've partnered with AAA as well as some other businesses. And this is it's a real simple program, but very effective program, and saves the department about $24,000 on each location where we do a co-location. And essentially what it is that we go to a business and we say, if you give us the space at no charge, we will set up a photo center, and we'll pay for the personnel to be there. We'll pay for the cameras, all those types of expenses, but we get the location at no charge. And to date, we are saving now in the hundreds of thousands of dollars on a yearly basis on the number of locations that we've already co-located, and we continue to work towards ultimately having no Penndot standalone centers. Now, these are photo centers, not driver licensing centers, and putting them into co-located centers. It's been extremely effective, and we've had a good working relationship with the businesses. And here again, it's made options available to our customers and the ability to be able to get these services near where those individuals work or live. Another customer convenience that we've recently deployed in the last 2 years are payment cards at Penndot driver licensing centers. Yeah, I know, and I had the same question. Why did it take so long? And it did. It took a long time for us to get to that point, but we're happy to report now that all of our locations accept payment cards, and not surprisingly, about 75% of our customers use payment cards now. So the adoption on the part of our customers was complete and thorough, and we suspect that that number will continue to grow as we move forward. Paul, if you go to the next slide. Here again, Qmatic, which is our computerized customer queuing system. We've expanded the use of that. It gives us real time. Frankly, sometimes we don't like to see the results now because they're not as good as we would like them to be. But they're giving us real solid information, and it allows us to be able to work towards improving and enhancing how we offer service to our customers. And having good data, as we all know, is extremely important in ensuring that we make the right decisions moving forward. And Qmatic, in this particular process that we utilize in many of our centers now, is giving us that data to be able to evaluate not only real-time customer impact, but also long-term changes that we may need to make as far as our operations are concerned. Along with Qmatic is a product called Expressia. If you've been to any of our driver licensing centers, for example, over in Summerdale, our newest center, which is really a model for the future, if you will, we have a system where you can press a button and it's simply a smiley face to a sad face. But it gives us real-time feedback on how our employees are interacting with our customers. Did the customer have a good experience, a bad experience, a mediocre experience? Excuse me. And in the case of an individual who pushes the sad face, that immediately sends a text to our supervisor. So our supervisor can interject and meet with the customer before they've left the building to say and ask them, what was bad about your experience? What can we do to make it right? And that, again, is an incredible tool when it comes to ensuring that we do the very best we possibly can for the customer experience. Green Initiative, paperless publications. We've moved in many cases to simply putting publications as well as documents on our website. It's given us a lot of flexibility from the standpoint of, for example, the driver's manual. The driver's manual is now in 18 languages. One of the reasons we can do that is because they are available on the website at this point in time, as are many of our forms. So we print on demand as opposed to stocking forms in warehouses, which has decreased costs significantly. And of course, green initiatives. We've done a lot from the standpoint of environmentally looking at our buildings and seeing what we can do to increase or reduce, if you will, the costs associated with our centers, whether that's LED lighting, or other areas, but HVAC systems and things of that nature. We are in the current process. Over the next 10 years, we've identified an initiative called Enhancing the Customer Experience. And that is a commitment to look at all of our locations, relocate locations that are too small, redo locations that simply need a good facelift, and also dedicating personnel as well to taking steps to doing everything we can to enhance the customer experience moving forward. As far as an overall vision for the future, I just wanted to touch a little bit on this and leave you with this, and that is this. We're seeing our work environment change just like everyone else is. The future for driver and vehicle services is one in which we see a continued evolution moving forward, and that is the elimination of physical products. We are piloting, or will be piloting here in the next month or so, a mobile driver's license that will be in addition to your physical license that you'll be able to put on your smart device. We certainly, as you know, I mentioned earlier, we've done away with the license plate sticker. We're also looking to be able to put your registration card on your smart device. And into the future, we piloted and tested a digital license plate. The future will most likely leapfrog over that, and at some point in time here in the not too distant future, we fully expect that car manufacturers will begin to design their license plates into their vehicles, and the role of the DMV will simply be to upload your license plate number to your vehicle, and it'll be displayed on your car, but it'll be part of the actual design feature as opposed to a separate entity that you have to attach to the vehicle. So these are the types of things that moving forward that we fully expect. That and electronic inspections, both at the commercial level as well as the personal vehicle level as well. And I see those coming in the not so distant future, along with our discussions in reference to MBUF and all the technology that will be needed to be able to deploy that program. I'm excited about it. I think the future is very bright. There are a lot of challenges, but I'm convinced that we can overcome those challenges and be a better organization, but more importantly, be an organization that's serving our customers and making sure that they're getting the services that they need. With that, Paul, I'll end, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Kurt. I checked. I don't seem to have the ability. I wanted to give you one of those smiley faces for your presentation that gave us a glimpse into that future. So we do appreciate what you're doing and looking ahead to. I also wanted to acknowledge Carl's comment. I think you set off that thought process of reentry into society, Kurt, when you talked about the very social component of what that identification really means to people. So I think there's a lot of humanity in this, not just infrastructure. So I appreciate that. I wanted to get a little bit of help from Larry, who kicked off this process. Larry, there was a question I kind of jumped right over, not keeping up with my chat as well as I should, came in relative to the FHWA potential future funding, whether there could be bonding or borrowing against the assurance of future FHWA funding. That I don't believe was a component of what this group has looked at, but it might be something you're familiar with and can potentially address for us.
Sure, happy to try and address that, and Chuck can chime in as well. But certainly, probably a little too premature, not knowing exactly, as I discussed, I think 2 meetings ago, what each of the federal bills from the House or the Senate and where they come together and what that may look like in the future. But certainly if there's a significant enough increase in federal funds, and that affords us some, I'd say, obviously certainty of federal funds because they're all looking at 5-year bills. Bonding certainly could be something that we'd look at down the road. If you were looking to me today, I'd say as a fiscal conservative, knowing that federal funds haven't increased, it'd be tough for me to say we're going to go ahead and, knowing that we can't already address all of our needs, bond and deplete the future federal funds as well. But the one thing I will say, not on the federal side, but on the state side, shortly after the passage of Act 89, I think as a department, as we saw that passage, we recognized future funds coming in, but we also recognize that there was a ramp up over a 5-year period. So this is where Chuck can correct me if I'm wrong, but we did actually go out at that point and do a little bit of bonding to get some projects moving a little bit earlier in the process before the actual realized benefits of Act 89 came on board. So again, we're certainly not, as a department, opposed to looking into bonding, and there has been some discussion on the federal side, and certainly if there's a significant enough increase, it's something that we could certainly look at down the road. So again, I don't think that we're necessarily afraid of it, but we definitely don't want to be where the Department of Transportation was in the early 1970s as well.
And exactly what Larry said, you know, if we knew right now we were going to get that additional federal funding, yes, it would lower our need in the future. And yes, we did borrow in 2014, 500 million against the known revenue increases, because Act 89 was a 5-year phase-in. So similar could be done here, you know, with the phase-in. Even if some of the things take a year or two to implement to actually see that revenue, we could borrow against that future revenue that is enacted, just we're not seeing yet.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Larry. So when it looks solid, you are not by any means opposed to, and certainly interested in, I guess, boosting cash flow through a bonding process there. Excellent. Keep the thoughts coming. My colleague Keith is going to take a look at the document review that's coming up, and that's for everybody on the commission. Keith, this is a rapid fire assignment you're going to talk about here.
Paul, the secretary used the words balanced and responsible early in our meeting today, and that's the approach being taken from a schedule management standpoint. I think we'll all look back at a 5-month assignment at some point in the future and be surprised that we were able to accomplish it. And we, the TROC, will accomplish it. We are, in supporting you, we are keeping to a day-by-day schedule at which we're trying to achieve balance between various segments of activity. So as I go through this, please know we're trying to maximize time for your review of these pieces as they come together in a proposal document, and ensure that there will be review of subsequent drafts. So the probably the key thing to pay attention to in this slide are the dates. Tomorrow you will receive an email, and that email will have some basic guidance or information about your review of a draft that brings everything together that you've done. It may strike you as odd that it's in 3 pieces, and I'll explain why. We would like you to look at the report cover. That will be a PDF file in terms of whether it reflects the packaging of your proposal as you would like it to. The strategic funding proposal that we spent most of our time on today will be presented to you in 2 ways. One will be an Excel file that's easy to use and review in terms of what are those elements, what are the revenue projections or estimates associated with it, what are the assumptions and the basic rationale. That will be reflected as well in the draft report, but we did want to give you the ability to look at the table, which will ultimately go away and be in later versions entirely encompassed in the draft report. Your first reaction when you see comments requested by Monday, July 19th, may be that that's a short amount of time. The way we would like to look at it is you have 2 weekdays available for review, 3 if you count Thursday, and anybody who's so inclined to do their review over the weekend, you have that as well. But we're requesting that your comments be returned, and we'll have that return information in the instructions by Monday. You will have flexibility, certainly, in how you respond. You can provide your responses in email, if you would like to incorporate suggested track changes or edits and comments in the report document, you may do that as well. That will give us another short window then to take those comments and address them in a revised version of the proposal. That particular round of revision is especially important for, among other reasons, to make sure that where there is varying opinion, where there are different views, that those are adequately reflected in that second draft. You won't see much of that in the first draft, obviously, but we do want to take the comments that come back and make sure in a very open kind of way, without individual attribution, that the revised version of the proposal does indeed strike that balance, that objectivity, that openness or democracy, if you will, that across the T-Rock there are varying opinions, and we'd like to reflect that certainly in a way that you'll want to see, in terms of being balanced, in terms of being objective, in terms of being fair. That's a very short amount of time to incorporate that and bring the work group leaders back together. They will meet on Friday morning, July 23rd at 8 o'clock to go through the revised version of the proposal with that, your comments reflected. Beyond that, and I'll just stick with this slide for a moment, that of course then creates another 5-day window, which is the fact that we meet on July 28th. So we will take the input from the work group leaders in their meeting on the 23rd. We'll likely be working with that over the weekend, and with the goal of having you a revised proposal in advance of our meeting on the 28th, which then creates one more window, Paul, and that is for our submission on either Friday, July 30th, the submission of the proposal, unless the chair would opt to submit it on Sunday, August 1st. And we're not assuming that scenario right now. So before I move on to the next slide, I would just like to open that up to any questions or comments. Mostly, though, our objective here is that you're familiar with the schedule, and when you see it, you'll find that it does really reflect the day-to-day schedule in which we're trying to strike a balance and give adequate time for review. Paul mentioned earlier that we're probably looking at about a 25-page document, which is not particularly onerous to review over 2 business days or 4 calendar days. I'll stop there for a second, Paul.
Do they get Monday as well, Keith? Yeah, you're saying Friday and Monday, and so depending on what time we get it out Thursday, it's could even be 3 business days, right?
It could be.
Okay.
And we'll shoot to have it out early tomorrow to create the 3 business days. Hearing no comments, and we'll have another chance. We'll go on to the next slide, please. At this point, we're expecting to include a comments form. If you would like to fill that out as part of your response, or respond with that form only if you would like. And it gets into, for the lack of a better phrase, any statement you'd like to make in terms of your support. If you would want to express that in terms of constructive conditions or qualifications of support. This too is aimed at providing that input that does strike the proper balance in the revisions that would occur after Monday. Also an open field allowing you to provide additional comments or statements. That these would not be attributed if for some reason in incorporating or reviewing comments that there's an overwhelming or a compelling reason to provide a quote of a T-Rock member, we would not do that without your express approval for doing so. So in a nutshell, the package as it goes out is intended to be convenient for your review and also flexible for review. And thank you in advance for providing your comments back by Monday. That would do it, Paul, unless there's any further discussion about the document review.
I think not. I thank you, Keith. Keith's been really driving this hard in the last week, and we'll have something for you tomorrow. So I don't think the meeting requires a great summation right now, but I do want to open it up to members of the public who may have joined us and would like to make a comment. The reminder that we invite you to comment, especially if you have no other means of input. There is a chat feature in the public feed that you may be using, but if you want to speak with us through your telephone, if that's the way you've hooked up, now is the time. Keep it brief, if you will. 2 minutes is a kind of imposed limit, and I have the tough job of cutting you off if you go a lot further than that. So we'll just pause for a moment and see if anyone wants to speak with us. All right, hearing none, I think that makes it 1 out of 8 that we had last time around. So, Secretary, you know where I'm going. It's back to you and your commission.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Keith. Another great session. I want to thank Larry, Kurt, and Mike for your informative presentation on the efforts and the initiatives to modernize and improve our programs, develop and enhance the organization around delivering those programs. Love how Kurt underscored the importance of better customer service, better services for our customers. Everything we do at Penndot is to better serve our customers. That is essentially the responsibility of management. However, modernizing our transportation funding structure is the essential responsibility of leadership. And the leadership includes all of you, TROC members, and your peers that can influence the new direction of our funding in years to come by taking care of the investments of the past and ensuring mobility for the today and for tomorrow of transportation. So let's keep this leadership responsibility in view over the next 2 weeks. I'd even suggest that we make the next 2 weeks the best of our 5-month effort. And again, thank you for your service to the Commonwealth and our customers as we near the finish line. See you all on July 28th. Be safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all, and anything that came in by chat, we so much appreciate. We'll keep that open for a few minutes, and we will be certain to make sure we address that in our review process. But from that, I'll just go back to our local delivery and our, I don't know, maybe MBUF and airplane picture here. So thank you all. Greatly appreciate your efforts in our much compressed timetable. And it's getting even more compressed, but we're going to make it. Signing off from TROC Studios. Thank you.